Welcome to 1 Plus 1, I'm Stan Grant. Now you might think you know Tim Minchin. He's an international star, he's a playwright, he's a musician, he's a comedian. But how much do you really know about him? How does he see himself and how does he see the world around him? I sat down with Tim Minchin for this interview about identity.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
Please give me the directions to the Hollywood sign. Everyone will have their 15 minutes. 15 minutes of shame. Women in SUV Porsches always look miserable.
Tim Minchin, welcome to 1 Plus 1.
Hello, Stan.
It just occurred to me too, when I say 1 Plus 1, it's a strange title because am I the one and you the plus one? Or are you the one and I'm sort of the less plus one?
Well, as a narcissist, I'm always the one.
The one.
No, I think I'm the plus. Surely, this is your show. I didn't hire the cameras, mate.
There's an existential question I like to pose at the start of these sort of questions about identity, and it's one I ask myself all the time. I ask you, who are you?
Oh, I'm terrible at that. I mean,
First thing that comes to your mind, if I say, who are you?
I'm one of 4 Perth kids, I suppose. I'm a member of my family.
That's really interesting. You know, everything's revealing. I mean, you could have said musician, you could have said comedian, you could have said a whole lot of things.
That was literally just what came into my head.
No, but that you've talked a lot about that, about the Perth kid growing up in Perth, the isolation of Perth, all that came with being a Perth kid, because you're a Perth kid who's the son of a doctor, and you're a rich Perth kid, and you went to a private school as a rich Perth kid. Saying you're a Perth kid, one of 4, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I suppose that's right. And of course, I don't see myself as a rich Perth kid because that's the nature of privilege, you know. That's the sort of thing that someone from the outside would say. I come from very modest, like my dad's a surgeon, his dad's a surgeon, so we're very, I have no memory of any fear or discomfort, which is a profound privilege. But of course, coming from Perth, the most isolated capital city in the world, and in a suburb and at a school where everything was just what it was, and given that my parents were, in hindsight, conscientiously not demonstrative of their comfort, we went on camping holidays and I had friends who went skiing and had remote control cars, and my parents never had a new car, I don't think, and they were not.
But they didn't have to worry about it.
They didn't have to worry.
So if they wanted to go on the skiing holiday or buy the new car, they could have done.
But I guess my identity is informed by what they presented, because I didn't know whether we could afford to go on ski holidays. I just knew we didn't.
It's really interesting though, because even then, when you ticked off some of those things and school, you spent a lot of time. Well, it seems to me you spent a lot of time. It may actually be a little bit of time in the rest of your life, maybe like anyone else's life, watching television and doing anything else. But you seem to me to have spent a lot of time just unpacking all that. School, religion, family, Perth. And there's a little bit of, am I right in saying there's always, an element of being self-conscious or worrying or wondering about your place in the world, even being a musician who's self-taught, that there is that question of how you fit in?
Yeah. I mean, you said, I spend a lot of time unpacking that stuff, and then you qualified it by saying, well, maybe not much time in your whole life. And that's how I feel about all these questions. I mean, I am both very confident with self-belief and deeply, I don't want to say insecure because it sounds whiny, but like unsure. It gets better with age and the more my career is established, but I'm driven by and quite obviously, I think, driven by a need to prove that I can do more. And
But
you
when-
are
but
too.
when
You
you're-
keep writing
oh,
books.
totally,
You're not good
totally.
at chilling out.
So, no, it's the last thing. But being on a stage with, you know, a 55-person orchestra and they're
think you'd feel
stellar
comfortable.
musicians,
Yeah.
and you're sitting there and you're going, I've got some facility, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
everything you learned, you taught yourself. So even
Yeah.
at that level,
I got taught a little bit. Yeah, I guess I identify myself as being reasonably at peace in the world. Like, you know, I'm a little bit nervous talking to you, but not very. But, you know, I can talk to prince and paupers and nothing really bothers me. And I identify that as being, the source of that being my loving family and the consistency of my childhood, the unquestioningness, which is obviously a huge part of this conversation, is that because of my upbringing, I never questioned my right to be in the world. And that's given me the ability to travel around the world, meet all these incredible people, have dinners with giant intellects and think, oh, I can...
yeah, you can do that.
I can keep up-ish.
And this is where, you know, it gets interesting for you and me. I can do that too.
Yeah.
I've travelled the world. I've stood in the Oval Office with Barack
Yeah.
Obama, and I've stood in the Great Hall of the People with Xi Jinping, and,
Yeah.
you know, the proximity to power. I've seen the worst, I've seen the best. And, you know, you can sit down and have a conversation with someone like you who comes from a very different background to me. And yet, the world was made for you. The world could not have been more made for you. The world we live in, this modern world,
Yeah.
to be male, to
Yeah.
be white,
Yeah.
to be heterosexual, even to be wealthy. There are questions that you don't have to ask.
That's right.
That I have to ask. Even my success,
Yeah,
I can't
doesn't make those
own.
questions go
No,
away. Yeah.
no, it doesn't. In fact, it makes them harder.
Yeah, I guess, and that is a big part. You said I spend a lot of time questioning and unpacking this stuff, and part of that is because as I've grown up and moved away from what in Perth is known as the Golden Triangle, this little privileged pocket of this little privileged city in this privileged country in this privileged time, and I've moved out into the world, and this has intersected with the arrival of the internet and this incredible wave of other people's experience, which is no longer curated by who gets to write a column in the New York Times or who gets published by Random House. It's just there. And I've lived in England and I've lived in the UK during Brexit and America during the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement and the rise of Donald Trump. And I've experienced all this stuff, and it's caused me great anxiety because I've had to admit what you're saying.
Yeah.
I've had to admit that the world was built for me.
Let me ask you about, because I want to get to some of it, because this is really interesting for me, because I don't get to have these conversations a lot. I have a lot in my head.
Yeah, me too.
But you know, to be on safe ground, there's people watching
In a pub.
watching us. But to be on safe ground and to have these conversations is really useful, and I hope people get something out of the spirit of it as well. But let me look at where we have differences. The Prejudice song.
Couple of G's, an R and an E, an I and an N. Just 6 little letters, all jumbled together, have caused damage that we may never mend. Only a ginger can call another ginger ginger. Only a ginger can call another ginger ginger. So listen to me.
When I heard that, and I listened to it again before the interview, and and it's funny and it's witty and I know where you're going and it's an anagram of the word we can't say, but you can say ginger, but you can't say the other. And I listened to it and I thought, okay, what's the point? Like, what were you saying? I know that the other word, the word we can't say, and the reason we can't say it, kills people. And in my family, it has meant, and the attitudes behind that word has meant that people have died, have lost their land, have been abused, and we still live with the historical significance of that. What were you saying? To say only a ginger can call another person ginger, but you can't say the other word?
I guess really, well, there's two things. There's there's an answer where I can sort of defend it, right? And there's an answer where I feel no need to defend it. The answer where I can defend it is I guess I'm making a joke about the fact, exactly what we're talking about. There is no equivalent. It's obviously inherently funny. I mean, I only say it's my least favourite song. It's my most popular song on YouTube. There's something funny to people and to me about the idea of treating the idea of having red hair with the gravity of something that's genuinely terrible, because it's obviously not. But also not trying to defend it is that I wrote that song when I didn't know anything. And I wrote that song when I didn't have an audience. So I'm playing 20-seat, I'm playing spaces like
Isn't it
this.
interesting it's your most popular song, though? It's like people want to think, oh, wow, that gives us a way of being able to have this conversation, because we can't have the real one, or the real one's too hard, or...
Well, I mean, this is a ridiculous comment, I guess, but I know black people who like it a lot, find it very funny. And I wouldn't be able to speak to why that is. But I wouldn't write that song now, which I'm completely comfortable. I'm not particularly comfortable. I don't feel comfortable talking to an Aboriginal Australian man about why I played with that word. That's not, that doesn't make me go, oh, because I'm a freaking legend. It makes me go, yeah, because I'm a dick. But not only am I a dick, I was a show-off. So you list we can list, and this is an important conversation about identity, I think, which is that there's, of course, as a white, straight, cisgendered, heterosexual and, brought up in comfort male, the world is made for me. But that's a list of things that are very clear. It's very clear that the world is, in inverted commas, made for those people. What it doesn't list is other things. For example, if you're a white, heterosexual, cisgendered, rich male with terrible mental health problems, you're immediately less privileged than someone who's black, trans, gay, but with a fantastic mental health. I feel most blessed to have my mental health of all that list of privileges. When I look at my friends, most of whom I guess are white and privileged too, but because I've been so lucky and being able to live in the world and be in the arts especially, I have friends who aren't white and privileged. And I look at them all, and the great thing the thing I feel most blessed with is my mental health, and so I guess the reason I say that is just to unpack why as and I'm just trying to sort of represent the privileged position in this conversation about identity, because I am very comfortable owning the fact that I'm privileged, and it's a privilege to be comfortable. But if I'm representing that position, because I guess it's important to do so in this conversation, I would say it feels strange as someone who, not like you, I've read your first, I think it was your first book, Talking to My Country. Not like you have, not from poverty to world-beating journalism, but in a different way to get from where I got to where I came from to where I've ended up. I mean, no one's ever done it. No privileged white kid from Perth has ever taught themselves how to write Broadway musicals. It's never happened. So I went through this journey, which included doing shocking comedy, like more shocking than the Prejudice song, and not about people of colour, but about all sorts of stuff. I played all the time in the sandpit of like what you can say. And you
worry, I know you've said too, I don't know whether you worry about it, but in the world we live in now, I think you've called it the post-humour world, that you could be metaphorically strung up for some of it, historical crimes, if you like.
Of course. And so I have material I would say I don't I wouldn't do it now. And I would say there's some stuff I'm like, oh my God, Tim. And there's some stuff I'm just like, you were a 20-something show-off and all your mates had jobs and you didn't. And you were clever. And because I can be clever with words and I can play with those words, I was just like going, this makes people laugh.
And you know that in the Twitter sphere or the you know the world that we live in, where it's prosecuted and people are judged, and you know that someone could pull something like that, take it out of that historical setting or context, and go, "This is who Tim Minchin is," and they could come after you hard, on the basis of that.
That would strike me as a pity. That would be very sad for me, and maybe I deserve it as a member of my privileged tribe. Maybe that's how we move forward. Just make sure people like me don't get second chances.
I think it'd be a pity too, because I think, like you, that we have to recognise that we're all finding our way in this world. And of course, there are privileges that you have and a power that comes from that has come at the cost of other people like me and my family. It has come at a cost. Yeah. And we're cognizant of that. But I'm not on the side of saying, you know what, let's cancel them forever because something was said once. But I think there is and atonement's not the word either. I don't believe we should have to bow down to, but I do believe we have to open up the way of being able to talk about these things and what led to it.
I think that's right. And I think atonement is sort of the word. It's just that the atonement can't be a set of flagellations that someone forces you to do, or you must apologise.
Self-criticism or something.
It's meaningless. A forced apology, as we've seen over and over again in politics. I'm not talking about the apology. I mean, on any issue, it doesn't resonate at all. It doesn't sit right because you know it hasn't come from the right place. So my atonement is to listen and learn and to make sure the work I put out in the world is positive. Now, I will keep making mistakes because I'm an idiot, or I have limited access to, I can't know everything at all times. But if my facility with language and with music and my willingness to say things that other people don't say, well, my facility language ended with Matilda, which not only generates thousands of jobs and millions of joyous nights
joy
out
and love,
but also has allowed me to give to charity and do education programs with the Royal Shakespeare Company. So it's good stuff. But it also allowed me to write the Cardinal Pell song, which some people watching this will say that's something I need to apologise for. So I've got it wrong at times, but the fact that I'm not scared, and that's a privilege too. I mean, I am scared. It makes me feel sick when people come back, and I've had death threats and all that. But the fact that I feel like it's important to say things, not like playing with words with the Prejudice song, but the same sort of like, actually, screw convention, I'm going to write this song, raised a lot of money for survivors of sexual abuse. And so I've gone on my journey. I have huge feelings of shame, not about my work so much, just about being a human, because I'm so shit. There's ego and there's neediness and there's desperate want to be loved and there's ignorance and then there's this desperate attempt to learn more. And I guess what we have to keep doing, and this is such a thing to say from my position, is that we have to keep remembering there are two perspectives. There's a historical perspective that talks about us in groups, and we talk about colour and gender and sexuality, and then there's another perspective which is just individuals. And if we prioritise this too much over this, we'll stop seeing each other. And the mission of this, the mission of saying, hey, white people, you realise the world was made for you, don't you? You have to understand that you are privileged in a way that you as a person of colour, will never be privileged. And we need to learn that. But if every individual chat or every individual interaction is about structural notions of privilege, then we'll miss each other.
Well, exactly. And, you know, I think also the idea of testing those boundaries, and I read as well that you feel like giving the progressive left a bit of a slap sometimes, of sort of
Yeah, definitely.
but
Not more than anyone else.
in what would you say, or what do you feel you want to say to outrage or to challenge the progressive left?
I mean, I don't want to say anything because I'm tired. The way Twitter talks to each other, it's not functional. It's not doesn't come from a good place. I guess to that extent, what I want to say is that dialogue needs to. There's a thing in philosophy, as I'm sure you know, because you've read everything, called the principle of charity. When you're arguing with someone, the way to move forward with the argument is to assume that the other person assume the best version of what they're saying, not the worst, and assume that they have good intent. They're not nefarious in their intent.
Which essentially, you know, what liberalism is meant to be based on.
That's
John
right.
Stuart Mill's talking about this.
Totally.
Immanuel Kant's talking about this, and you know, a cosmopolitanism that we find ourselves in. But I just want to, when I was thinking about this, I thought, okay, to challenge the progressive left, and I looked at something like religion, and you know, atheism is something that you've spoken about and you've talked about. It's another thing where I sort of stubbed my toe a little bit, because you can say you don't believe in God, or even that religion is a negative in our lives. Would you say the same thing about the dreaming?
No.
You wouldn't. Why?
No.
I mean, is it not just superstition? Is it not just the same?
I suppose it is.
You know, is it the same? You know, what I am meant to believe, is that any different to believing that Jesus rose from the dead and the resurrection or the virgin birth or whatever else, or creation of the world in 7 days?
So what I criticise is
6 days and a rest day, to be scripturally
6 days
accurate.
and then chilling. What I criticise is the intersection between religion and bigotry. So religion is so the way we construct our identities, I think you'll agree, is that we tell stories. And this I'm obsessed by because this is my job. Matilda's a story. Jesus Christ is a story. The dreaming is a story.
So the story per se, not a problem, but the intersection of story and
so if you use
politics
your story,
or...
so if the dreaming became an institution called The Dreaming, capital D trademark, and the dreaming earned billions of dollars and became basically a real estate scam, like Scientology or arguably Catholicism, like not a scam, a real estate acquisition system, and Indigenous Australians had gold robes and shoes, and they closed the gates on their thing, and they didn't let you know what they did with their money or what, and if they used the dreaming as justification for saying gay people are lesser or trans people are lesser or women are lesser or you shouldn't have abortions, then I would be going after the dreaming.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. You've come back to Australia, and as I did, and I felt, I spent, add up all the years, maybe 17, 18 years outside the country in different places, but I always knew this was my home, being Indigenous, being a spiritual home, but also it's my country for all of the problems. And did you feel this was where you had to be, your children, where you needed to be?
I think so. I have a sense of home dysphoria. I mean, it's the thing in my album, it's in a lot of my writing, is that I've made too many homes and it's screwed up my head. I miss Melbourne, I miss London so much because London's where my kids were born.
London.
And where my career was born and where I was finally, still it's the place where I'm sort of actually respected as an artist. And down here I'm still like that Pell guy and that, whatever. But it's whatever that respected as an artist means. We've got these friends in LA.
That's the Perth boys speaking.
Yeah, that's right. And now I'm in Sydney and I'm building a home here and I've got sisters here, but my mum's at home. And so I identify, in terms of stories, right, and whether I'm allowed to or not, I find the most profound sense, the biggest gift that I get as an Australian is when I get to go to arts, this is going to sound really like I'm sucking up. When I go to an opening or something and someone does a welcome to country, I'm not kind of anti any spiritual stories. The idea of country, which I think white Australia has been gifted as a concept by Indigenous Australia, is profound to me. And it's a privilege for me to have got educated enough and to have travelled enough and to have been in the arts where I've met lots of different people to be able to understand, I think, the importance of my identity as a white Australian and how it only makes sense, or it makes more sense, or at least it adds profundity is added to my sense of Australianness and self if I engage as much as I can or am allowed to with First Nation story, right? But that's privilege too. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the concept of country suits me. You know, I've got a Maori thing around my neck because it was given to me when I was in New Zealand and they told me a story of what it meant, and I wear it when I'm like doing something where I'm not quite, you know, don't feel like very centered, and you know, what a load of crap. Mm-hmm. And yet, because I believe that life is the story and we are built of narratives, I think it's a good way to be. Mm. I think it's a meaningful way to be, and it's a well-meaning way to be. Mm. But there's two problems. One is I'm bowerbirding or whatever it is. I'm appropriating, although I don't think that's what it is. The other is, of course, most Australians don't get to do plays with Indigenous stories and go and get welcomes to country at the opening of a festival and have an amazing ceremony because I gave some money to an arts charity and now I've got this thing. Most Australians, white, brown, black, whatever, are just holding on and just want their house and just want their family and just want to not have to work every day of the week.
And here's these couple of privileged blokes
and we're like
you and I sitting.
What is the problem with the Australian identity? And if I want to say something to lefties, it's take into account that not every white person on Twitter has read the books you've read. That's all. Just know that they're not evil. They haven't read the books you've read. And there'll be books you haven't read. Mm. That means you seem evil to someone else. Now, there's not moral equivalence. There's not all ideas are the same, you know, and that right-wing guy who hates, you know, it's not all equivalent. It's just that you have to understand that people have come from where they've come, have read what they've read and heard what they've heard. And the goal of making society and the world a better place has to have some gentleness. Mm. It can't only be fire and rage. Mm. Although I, of all people, can't preach against polemic and rage because I've made a living out of it. But it has to also acknowledge that people come from where they've come from and they might look privileged, but who knows what they've been taught or what they've failed to be taught or what they're battling with at home or, you know, I don't know.
Sounds good to me. I've loved this. This has been a real pleasure, mate.
It can't be half an hour.
Thank you. Probably well over half.
I thought we were just about to start.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Really good. Thanks.
Thanks.